What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another edition of Pistons Daily, where you can find daily content covering all things Detroit Pistons, Monday through Friday. I'm your host. My name is Kyle Garrison. I'm over on Twitter at Kyle Garrison2, where I talk all things Detroit sports. So head over there, give me comments, questions, concerns, episode ideas. I'd love to hear from all you guys. Also, shout out to everyone who tunes in every single day. The support on the channel has been growing at an unbelievable rate. It is all thanks to you guys. So once again, I really appreciate it. Also, I apologize once again for my voice. I had a very long weekend and I'm totally losing it, but bear with me because I have a ton of stuff I want to talk about. But with that being said, let's jump right into today's video. So first thing I wanted to touch on is there is a opportunity for Khris Middleton to be bought out by the Washington Wizards. And I've been pretty adamant about the Pistons needing a backup four to fill some Tobias less minutes, and I think that most of you agree with me. I've talked about Chris Boucher, Trey Lyles, Precious Achiuwa as three potential options there that are still available on free agency, but one that could make a lot of sense as somebody who could be bought out, and that is Khris Middleton. The Wizards are in a very weird spot in their current roster. They're trying to become obviously a lot younger. They dealt off Jordan Poole this past year. They did get CJ McCollum back, which was kind of a lateral move. But Khris Middleton, he's 33 years old, doesn't fit their timeline, and I think that the Wizards could buy him out, especially because he did just opt into about a $30 million player option. So that could be the case for him. And I like Khris Middleton. I think he was originally drafted 39th by Detroit in 2012. So I think this pickup could make a lot of sense if he's bought out. The contract would be very cheap as well. And the Pistons have two roster spots open. And Washington's just going in all in on their young core right now. So Khris Middleton is most likely going to be available, if not this offseason, but the next one. But I would be surprised if the Wizards kept him on the roster going into this year and don't buy him out. So this is obviously a hypothetical scenario, but if he is bought out, I expect the Pistons to at least inquire about it. He's 33, like I mentioned, so obviously there is a little bit of trepidation, but on a cheap deal, there's not a lot of risk there, and there's a high reward because he's still a very talented scorer in this league, and I think he can come in off the bench for the Pistons, provide great minutes for Tobias when he's not in the game, and it will allow Ausar Thompson and Ron Holland to play specifically at the wing position instead of forcing them to play at the power forward. I just don't want to see them do that this year. I think that will stunt their development, and I just don't think that's going to be good for them in the long run. They're not power forwards. They're small forwards, so the Pistons have to address it, and Khris Middleton could be a guy that would be a great option there. Especially for Khris Middleton, who, he hasn't played over 60 games since 2021, which is obviously concerning. But for someone who is relied on as a full-time backup, if he were to be on the Pistons, I think he can stay healthy on 15 to 18 minutes a night in a just decreased role overall compared to the 25 plus minutes he's been playing over the last couple of years. He's had some injury-riddled seasons, but once again, if you do sign him on a veteran minimum or you use that biannual exception, whatever he is looking for from a new team, then that could also be an option. It's very cheap. Again, Pistons need a high, a low risk, high reward pickup in this spot right now, and I think that Khris Middleton could make a lot of sense if he is bought out. But let me know in the comments if you'd like to see the Pistons pursue Khris Middleton as a backup four if he's bought out by the Wizards, and I'll obviously continue to keep you guys updated on Middleton if he's brought out over the next couple weeks. But I just wanted to mention it right now as a possibility before people start talking too much about Trey Lyles and Chris Boucher and Precious Achiuwa like I have, because there's still some people that could be available here in the next couple weeks, and Khris Middleton's one of those guys. But moving on, I saw an article, I think it was Bleacher Report. Yeah, they ranked the most underrated NBA players of the last 5 years, and there wasn't anybody on the Pistons list, or on this list from the Pistons, but I just wanted to touch on some underrated skills and aspects of this Pistons roster that I really like and I don't think gets enough praise. The first one being Tobias Harris' defense. A lot of us heard about how bad Tobias was in the playoffs for Philadelphia, and although his offense was the main reason in the fans' perspective, I think his defense was actually more where the real concerns came in and the reasons why the Philadelphia front office wanted to part ways with him. But as soon as you put Tobias Harris in the JB Bickerstaff defensive system, I mean, he thrived and he was vastly improved from what we've seen from year to year when he was in Philadelphia. When you're looking at his just overall advanced stats, his defensive box plus minus in 2025 was 0.6. And that was the third highest mark of his career and best since 2020. Obviously, those aren't earth shattering numbers for Tobias Harris. But when you're looking at what he was doing previously throughout his time in Philadelphia and even his time in Detroit, he was much, much better last year, especially in the playoffs and then in the regular season as well. Just being a positive defender when he was on the floor and being able to guard 3 through 5, like I mentioned yesterday. So I just really like what he brought to the table. He's only had a couple years in his career where he is above a negative defensive box plus minus. And basically what that stat is just a box score estimate of the defensive points per 100 possessions a player contributed above a league average player, translated to an average team. So Tobias last year, like I mentioned, 0.6. That was the third highest of his career. And I mean, that's really encouraging. He's 33 and he's playing some of the best defense of his career. I think that has a lot to do with his work ethic and just, his love of being a really good basketball player. Obviously, he wants to continue to play at a high level at this point in his career, but it also speaks volumes to what JB Bickerstaff brings to the table as a defensive coach. And I just know Tobias Harris prides himself on being able to guard multiple positions and be a plus defender when he's out there, because as he gets older, the offensive parts of his game are probably going to take a little bit of a dip. And if he can continue to stay consistent with that defense, then we're not going to be talking about needing a starting power forward, at least for this year. Looking at more just of his overall numbers in the playoffs, his defensive box plus minus was all the way at a 1.6, which was the highest mark of his playoff career by a significant margin. And just overall, his defense kept them in multiple playoff games. We've talked about it before. He guarded Karl-Anthony Towns and was incredible. So I love to see that Tobias Harris really prides himself on the defensive end, and I'm excited to kind of see him translate that to this year, especially with more time with playing with Ausar Thompson. And hopefully that will continue to stay consistent for Tobias moving forward. And then another aspect of this team that I think is very, very underrated, and I just think that's Isaiah Stewart's overall impact. I mean, I pulled up some numbers here. In his most limited role as an NBA player yet, Isaiah Stewart had the best defensive season of his career, and I genuinely think he put people on notice. I think people realize now what the type of impact that he can make on the defensive end. He had a 6.7 block percentage, which is just unbelievable for a guy who played around 20 minutes a night. Really, didn't get a ton of options to come in and really get going offensively, but was unbelievable as a rim protector. He had his lowest usage rate of his career by over 2% at 12.4% last year, and obviously that has to do with just a decreased role offensively, but even on a lower usage rate, he was still extremely effective, offensively and defensively. He had 2.2 defensive win shares and an astounding 2.1 defensive block plus minus. And I mean, it's to the point where the numbers obviously back it up. It's just a matter of people noticing it and people giving him the credit that he deserves. I get it. He only plays 18, 19, 20 minutes a night. But that doesn't mean he still isn't an incredible defender and really ascend this team's defensive ceiling whenever he steps on the floor. So the fact that he can come in and relieve a more offensive-minded center like Jalen Duren, that's such a great 1-2 punch to have. And I think it's just one of the most underrated center rotations in the league. Isaiah Stewart's stats last year, offensively were not great, but if you go in and you take a look and you dive deep into just what he did on the defensive end, it was pretty remarkable. So shout out to Isaiah Stewart. He's going to come back, and I think that he's very bummed he wasn't able to be a part of that playoff run last year, and I think he's going to come back with some vengeance and continue to be just an unbelievable defender for the Pistons. And then the last underrated skill I wanted to touch on is just Jalen Duren's overall passing. I think we've talked about it a couple times on here, but I haven't really dove too much into it. Every year, his assist percentage has gone up in the league. Last year was 14.7, and in the playoffs was 16%. So he almost doubled his offensive win shares as well from 3 to 5.9. And obviously, that had a lot to do with just his overall ability to be a lob threat for Cade Cunningham. but that also had to do with the fact that he was finding open players when he was catching the ball and kind of getting stood up by centers. He was finding ways to facilitate as a 6'11", very raw offensive center, and that skill is just coming together. We've seen it. I've talked about him, his comparison being kind of a Bam Adebayo player. I think that's a lot, has to do with a lot of body type, but also the fact that Bam Adebayo is a very, very good passer, and so is Jalen Duren. And that is what separates the best centers in the league, the Alperen Senguns and the Karl Anthony Towns and the Nikola Jokic's, from some of these other guys. And I think that underrated skill for Jalen Duren is going to allow him to get up into those, maybe not defensively, but as one of the best offensive centers in the entire NBA. So I love to see what he brings to the table. I love to see the improvement from year to year. And then obviously being a lob threat for Cade while providing just steady improvement, playmaking at the center position is where he can kind of make his money in this league. And I'm just excited to see what he can do this year in his progression as a player. Also, the Duncan dribble handoffs we've talked about, super exciting with the off-ball movement of Ausar Thompson, Jaden Ivey, and Ron Holland, a bunch of athletic 2 and 3 guards. And then obviously the overall just threat of Cade as a passer will really allow JD to just get better. And we saw that he was very solid last year and into the playoffs, and we saw the progression as the regular season went on, especially even on the defensive end of the floor too. That isn't even just looking at his offense, but that's another topic for another day. But I just think that he's going to show off some of that versatility this year and really put people on notice. We've talked about that with a bunch of different players. They have a very, very good and just big opportunity to go out there and put the rest of the NBA on notice and let them know that, we may not have made huge additions this offseason, but man, this young core is progressing and they're starting to look really, really good. So I'm very excited about that, but moving on to our third topic of the day, I just wanted to quickly touch on the Ausar Thompson extension. So we've talked about Jaden Ivey, we've talked about Jalen Duren and their extensions and the fact that team-friendly deals would be ideal just depending on what their seasons look like this year. With Ausar, he is eligible for an extension next summer, obviously because he was in the draft class after Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren, but I just think that what we saw from Ausar Thompson's offensive game last year and the upside he has, obviously combined with elite defensive ability, he might already be a top 10 defender in the entire NBA entering year 3 after only playing half of last year. That is unbelievable to think about. In such a small sample size, obviously, we'll have to take it with a little bit of a grain of salt, but in a small sample size, he was so unbelievable dominant. He transcended this team, hit their defensive upside when he came back from injury. And I think the Pistons they have to prioritize how they're going to be able to keep all three of those guys, how they're going to satisfy the needs of Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren, while also having to think about Ausar Thompson's extension next year. So I think that his contract could be anywhere north of $25 million a season, and if you take into consideration Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren, I think $25 million is a decent amount. But if you take them out of the picture and we just look at Ausar Thompson as a player, he's a guy that can again transcend your team defensively. He can play the point forward. He's shown the ability to facilitate as well. He attacks the rim at will. He catches lobs, and I think that he's going to continue to improve his mid-range / floater game. I don't think he'll ever be a consistent three-point shooter in this league, but all of those things I mentioned are unbelievably valuable for a guy who is ridiculous on the defensive end. I mean, there's just no other way to put it. He, off ball, on ball, he can literally do everything. He makes everyone around him better. And if he asks for a 4-year, $100 million extension, if you're the Pistons, short answer, you take that right away. If his agent is, saying we want an extension north of $100 million, I think you have to consider that as well. This may change over the next year, but we'll have to consider what he does this season and if he continues to show improvement. But I truly think he will. He put on some muscle and he's doing everything the Pistons front office is asking of him, and I think he's deserving of a contract anywhere from $22 to $30 million annually, and I expect that to be the range, barring any massive changes. But overall, I think Ausar will deserve a massive extension, and I expect the Pistons to get that deal done much quicker than what we're seeing from Jalen Duren and Jaden Ivey. I wouldn't be surprised if Ausar Thompson is given an extension, before August next year, And that's just because I think that the value he provides on the defensive end might just overshadow what Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren give you overall as players. I do expect both of those guys to be back, but maybe on a little bit of a discount because you have to take into consideration Ausar Thompson might get $30 million in his extension. So I think that's just really interesting to look at. Let me know in the comments if you think that $30 million is too much. I know that's a little aggressive. I think it's going to be closer to $25 million. But if we see a huge improvement in his offensive game, everything could change. So moving on, before we end the show, I just wanted to touch on quickly the Pistons preseason schedule and just go over some of the matchups and things I'm excited to see in preseason this year. So I'll read the schedule to you guys real quickly here. So Monday, October 6th is at the Grizzlies. Thursday, October 9th at the Milwaukee Bucks. Tuesday, October 14th at Cleveland Cavaliers. And then the Thursday, October 16th versus the Wizards. So we are just about when you guys are seeing this, we are exactly 2 months away from the Pistons' first preseason game. And I'm just really excited for a lot of things going into the season. And when we get a preseason look, I'm excited to see some different things from different players. Even if they don't immediately translate that to the regular season, preseason is a great time to just kind of work on things that you might want to add to your bag. So 3 things that I just wanted to touch on before we end the show here is I'm excited for the Jaden Ivey return. I just like to see how his movement looks, if he's laboring at all on drives, if the downhill finishing has improved, if he's still as explosive as he was last year off that broken fibula, and overall just what his shot creation looks like both on and off ball. I'm excited to see him as a ball handler, excited to see him as a point guard, and I think that in the preseason it'll get him acclimated to just being back on an NBA court, and that'll be really fun to watch. And then another thing I'm excited to see, number 2, is just JD's improvement, Jalen Duren's improvement. I know we talked about the passing improvement, but I think he's going to show us offensively that he is going to be a very, very good center long term, not just as a scorer or as a lob threat, but somebody, like I mentioned, who can facilitate and who can also kind of have a face-up jump shot from the free throw line extended. I don't know if he's ever going to be a three-point shooter, but I do think that he has enough touch and he has enough ability to shoot over other taller defenders to really have a solid face-up game where he has the option to pass, shoot, or drive to the hole. So I think that's going to be huge for him. We make the Bam Adebayo comparison every time we talk about him. I apologize if that's annoying to you guys, but when you watch a Bam Adebayo player, or when you watch a Bam Adebayo play, it's kind of reminds you of what Jalen Duren could be and some of the things that we've seen from Jalen Duren in his ability to blow by defenders off the dribble and also pass and shoot mid-range jumpers as well. So I'm just excited to see Jalen Duren's raw skill unfold, and I think that's going to be a big part of his game going forward on whether or not he's going to be a $20 million guy on his next extension or closer to a $26-27 million if that jump shot starts to come into form. And lastly, before we end the show here, Ron Holland. I'm just excited to see Ron Holland in year 2. I'm excited to see if that jump shot is for real. He has so much raw skill and is just, for a guy who seems a little bit out of control at times, the efficiency around the rim is just unbelievable. And I'm really looking to see him just expand outside the paint more offensively and just kind of take over for Malik Beasley as the leader of that bench unit. Obviously, him and Malik are very, very different players, but the overall confidence that Ron Holland has reminds me of Malik Beasley. He's got a swagger to him, and he doesn't back down from any challenge, from anybody, and that's what you need in your 20-year-old sophomore who is trying to develop an offensive game that not a lot of people thought he could have in the NBA. So he's defying the odds. I'm really excited to see what he can do in preseason, coming off the bench, using the bench unit, how he meshes with guys like Duncan Robinson, guys like Karis LeVert, and whoever rounds out that bench unit for the Pistons. So that's going to be really fun to watch, and I'm excited to see him kind of prove to everyone why he deserved to be a top 5 pick last year. But that's all I've got for you guys today. Let me know in the comments or over on Twitter your thoughts on the Pistons potentially acquiring Chris Middleton if he is bought out by the Washington Wizards. Also, what underrated aspects of the Pistons team do you appreciate the most, and are you excited to see this season? and also overall what you're excited to see in 2 months once we get into preseason and headed into the regular season. Just some different things that you are looking for and things you would like to see me cover in future videos as well. But as always, like, subscribe, comment, turn on post notifications, and follow me on Twitter at Kyle Garrison 2. Also, head over to Spotify, leave a 5-star review and a follow if you can. Once again, thank you all so much for tuning in every single day. With that being said, that is going to do it here for episode 37 of Pistons Daily, and I will catch you all next time.